Thank you so much, Divya. Uh, Also, Jacob and Chiku for helping me out with everything from the last 2 days. And a very special thank you to jhatka.org for organizing this webinar, for letting me talk on a topic that's very close to my heart, something that I love talking about. And lastly, thank you so much for everyone who's attending this talk today. I'm hoping to enlighten you and share my learnings from the social space about working with volunteers and what we can do to engage and mobilize them, right? So if we're ready to get started, if we can move on to the next slides. Divya, do you want to give a little bit of context here?
Yeah, can you go to the can you go to the next slide to the house rules? So all of the photos that you see are that you will see throughout the PPT are from activities that we've done over the years. And yeah, so can you go to the next slide, Chico? Yeah, so I just want to quickly go through the house rules just so that we have a smooth webinar. So let's make sure we're all very respectful to each other. Please note that this webinar is being recorded and also we are streaming live on Facebook at the moment through the jhatka.org Facebook page. Please make sure you mute your microphones at all times. The host will be able to mute all microphones as and when required. Let's have one person speak at a time. And we will also, like Jacob said, open for questions in between at the midpoint and also at the end of the session. But as and when you have questions, please feel free to use the chat box and leave your questions there. In the interest of time, of course, we may not be able to answer all the questions. But if you do have some burning questions, please definitely write to us. We will be leaving our email addresses later in the PPT as well. But just for this, you can write to us at info@jhatka.org with volunteer engagement in the subject line. In the interest of a healthy learning experience, the admin reserves the right to maintain decorum. Thank you so much. Bharat, you can continue.
Thank you, Divya. Can we move on to the next slide, please? Yes, awesome. The previous slide, thank you. Uh, yeah, so to set context, right, this is one of my most favorite photos from when I was doing my fellowship at Make a Difference back in 2014. You can see a whole bunch of passionate young people uh, who joined Make a Difference and were chosen for the fellowship program. This was in 2014, but what I'm more excited to talk about is 2013, where I began my volunteering journey uh, as an IT employee. I was looking for something to do, and I found an organization that sort of resonated with my ideas, with my thoughts, and that's how I came across Make a Difference. And I worked with them for almost 6, 7 years, and mostly all of last year, I've spent a lot of time trying to reverse engineer the probably one of the best experiences that I had in my life as a volunteer. And if I reverse engineer it, what I'm trying to do is see if we can break down how we can give an experience to volunteers, the kind of experience that I had, right? And while I'm setting context, I quickly want to move on to the next slide and also talk about what kind of volunteer-based systems are possible. I'm looking at 80 to 100 odd people here today who could be from all kinds of organizations, right? You're working with children, you're working with, say, online change, you're working with climate, you're working with so many different causes. But at the end of the day, mostly all organizations have three kinds of volunteer based systems. If we can move on to the next slide, you either have full time volunteers, part time volunteers, or one off volunteers, right? This is still me talking about what kind of volunteers you could have. So, if you have one off volunteers, you have people who come in just once for, say, an event that you're running or for a campaign that you're running. Part-time volunteers are those who are either coming back to you on a week on week basis or a month on month basis or once in 2 3 months. And then there's full time volunteers, or you could call them fellowships, you could call them internships, you can call them whatever uh, terminology that you have, but ideally they engage with you on a daily basis or a full time basis, right? And this session is primarily not looking at the different kind of volunteer based system that you have. I'm hoping that these ideas apply to all three. Some of them may apply to one off volunteers, but I'm hoping that all organizations here are also thinking, why would we just have volunteers who are meeting us once in a while or just once? Can we get them to continue? So I'm hoping that the larger part of the audience that I'm addressing or this session covers is part time or full time volunteers, right? Uh, with that context being set, I also would like to talk about some of the mindsets that we have before we communicate with volunteers or even just talk about volunteering itself, right? So, the first big thing that I want to talk about is good versus bad volunteers. If you want, you can take a look at this image. Can you tell me if those people are good volunteers or bad volunteers? It's a trick question. There are no good or bad volunteers. A lot of organizations spend time trying to classify their volunteers. Oh, this person is showing up a lot, this person is not showing up, this person is good, this person is bad, this person is going above and beyond, so they are good, this person is, you know, disrupting things, so this person is bad. In my experience, there are no good or bad volunteers. You either have engaged volunteers or not engaged volunteers. And if they're not engaged, they tend to slip away or slowly move on, right? And that's what we call bad volunteers. So if you can make one change in perspective, it is there are no good or bad volunteers, right? Can we move on to the next one? The us versus them mentality. This is something I talk about a lot, which is when you are an organization and you have a bunch of full time employees or you have people who are leading volunteer teams, you always look at yourselves as us and the volunteers as them. And the moment there is a divide that's created in between, what happens is that you are unable to uh, bring them on your side. You're always looking at them as a separate entity, right? And another perspective change that I would like for all organizations, all teams, even team leaders to make is look at everybody as a big team and everybody is a part of this, like we're in this together, right? Don't look at them as, oh, okay, we are us and they are them and we need to design something for them, right? If your volunteers are involved in all the challenges, all the programs, everything that you are doing along with you, then they're a part of the solution rather than being a part of the problem that needs to be designed for separately, right? Moving on to the next slide, as an extension of the previous slide, is collective ownership. Everyone is a part of the solution. So if you as an organization have full-time employees who enjoy all the successes, feel all the pain when there's a failure, you are not doing this right. Your volunteers need to feel the ownership and need to be there, right there with you, and they should enjoy the highs and lows of your organization and not be people who are just called upon for a weekend to deliver your programs, right? If they believe in the cause, if they believe in what you're doing, they are a part of this organization, they are with you, right? And how do you achieve that? You achieve that by coming from a space of care and support. Always ask your volunteers what you can do to serve them better and see what you can do to make sure that they have a good experience, right? So far I have not given you any new gyan or anything that you don't know, but I'm just talking about the basic shifts in perspectives that we need to have while we're addressing volunteers and while we're talking about volunteering in itself, right? Can we move on? The last important piece is balance between seriousness and fun. If we as an organization do only work, or have like just make sure that everybody's showing up for the after party, that you're not doing this right. So make sure that you find the right balance between seriousness and fun, because volunteering at the end of the day is people giving you their time. And if they feel that, oh, this organization is too serious, or oh, this organization is just about partying and hanging out and not really doing work, then the volunteers also tend to slip out, right? And in conclusion, the next slide will tell you what I'm trying to say, which is time is everything, right? When somebody is volunteering for you, it means they are giving you their time. Their time is very precious, their time is very valuable. Every second counts. So if you as an organization have volunteers uh, working with you, please make sure that every second of their time is being utilized and they feel like they're doing something larger than themselves. Otherwise, what happens is they feel like it's not the best use of their time, right? So, those were some of the perspectives that I wanted to talk about when we talk about volunteering and like communicating with volunteers. So, before we move to the next part, which is what drives engagement and mobilization, I want to see if any of you have any questions that I can answer. Jacob, would you like to help me out?
Sure, Bharat. Uh, Dave, I believe you had a question. The question was, as it is Pride Month, we would like to discuss with the lead about strategies we can employ at our organizations to promote a culture of inclusiveness and be non-judgmental. Uh, I assume this is going to be about operating with volunteers because of the context of the webinar. So yeah, that question's from Dave. It's like, how do we create a culture of inclusiveness and being non-judgmental?
Excellent. I think that's a very good question. In order to create a culture of anything, I believe that you need to put it out there, right? Culture is driven by when every member of your team follows it or is aware of what is going on. So if that is going to be, if say Pride Week is going to be the theme of something that you want to drive among your volunteers, start putting messaging about it and make sure that your messaging also is complementary to what your actions are. Right? If you want to create a uh, space of non-judgmental, uh, like just have no judgment in between the volunteers and your team, like give space for people to be vocal and show them that it is a safe space that people can express themselves in any way possible, right? As for smaller strategies, as for smaller ideas of exactly what you could do, I feel like I can answer those maybe later, or you can wait for the rest of the slides to see some of the platforms and see some of the ideas that I'm going to suggest and see if any of those are helpful. But yeah, I think culture is a very important component here.
Thanks, Bharat. We have a question from Vidvansh. Vidvansh has asked, how can we convince someone who's confused about whether to join the team or not?
Right.
So it sounds like, how do you convince a confused potential volunteer? Yeah.
Right. Excellent. So I think something that you do here is you put yourself out there and tell the volunteer that this is exactly what we do. Uh, it's okay if you express the ups and downs and the highs and lows and give them an honest perspective of what the job or the tasks look like. And while you are someone who's going to be selecting them into your organization, it'll be great if you can give them that space to see if they fit in. And if it's a mutual give and take, I feel like volunteers also feel, what, this is a choice I have made just as much as the organization having selected me. I have also selected this organization, and that is a great mindset for people to come together and work together. Uh, yeah, that's at the ideological level at least.
We have a question from Karen Jane from the registration form. She said she would like to understand how to engage people to keep their energy high during COVID-19. This is an especially hard time and a very specific question about this time. And I believe she's will make a difference. So,
Right. Uh, yeah, I think the currently everyone is in innovation mode. Everybody's thinking about how the new normal is going to be, right? And people are wondering if any of this is even possible. But what I've learned from the last 2 3 months is if companies are still fully functional, if NGOs are fully functional, despite beneficiaries being far away and people locked inside their house, uh, I feel like we can do this, right? Now, usually how I approach questions like this is say, what am I doing to keep myself engaged? For example, I'm watching Netflix, and I'm sure a lot of you are nodding right now saying, yes, that's what I'm doing too. So, what is Netflix doing for you that you can emulate for your volunteers to bring them together, right? Is a way you think about this. Think about all the different things that are keeping you occupied. If you could replicate that towards your volunteers and pull them towards yourself and keep them motivated and keep them going, nothing like it. And I think one thing that definitely works is constantly talking about the reality. If you have WhatsApp groups, if you have uh, different platforms where you're connecting with them, like through video calls or anything, it's okay to talk about how things are going so that people realize they're not alone. Whatever you're going through, probably your volunteers are going through them as well. So if you can have talks about that, if you can converse at that level, you are going to have people connecting better with each other, right?
thank you. Thanks, Bharat. Do we have time for another question?
Yes, we can take one more.
Chiku, can I request you to stop the slides just till we finish this one more question, please? Just stop sharing the slides. Yeah. So we have a question from, okay, Manini, may I request you to come up and ask a question? If you don't want to, don't worry. I can just say or read a question out loudly. And you want to ask a question directly to Bharat with your mic and camera on, you can say yes or no in chat.
Yeah,
Don't
hi.
worry.
So actually, I have a question about how we can join and be able to select the right volunteering team or association. So what happened is that I happen to be an individual volunteer working for different CSR activities, and I wanted to explore the possibilities for, say, something around transplanting the trees that were uprooted along the metro routes. So I kind of inquired with everyone possible, called up even at the metro channels. So finally, nothing really happened, and I was unable to gather volunteers or get in touch with associations who would actually work for it. So I just wanted to know what would be the right channels and what should be the approach that we can take for such purposes, because I'm sure there would be other people also who would be interested. So how exactly can we go about such initiative?
Right. I think there are a lot of spaces which either have people volunteering or people who are working for a similar cause. So if you could reach out or even do a little bit of research to see what other organizations are working towards this. For example, uh, what you just mentioned, I'm sure the folks at Jhatka would also be happy to help out. I'm sure they have contacts. Uh,
So I did get in touch with organizations like Say Trees and some more who actually work on those lines, but I was unable to, and some Whitefield Rising, those were the organizations that I did get in touch with. So just wanted
yeah,
to learn how exactly we can go about it if we really want to work
right.
on such things. Yeah.
Right. I think, yeah, now getting the right resources, or like if you want to really take it out and go ahead and do something, you can also like gather a bunch of people and start something yourself. Like movements are started like this with people who are really passionate about what they want to do. And once you get 40, 50 people along with you, then you can even register and start something on the legal front. where you're taking action and you have a whole team of people. How you take care of these people and how do you get them to come with you is what I'm going to talk about in the upcoming slides. As for the
Thank you.
process,
Sure.
yeah, this is my recommendation.
Bharat, we seem to be losing your network.
My network, am I audible?
Yeah, you are. I think Jacob is stuck.
Oh, okay. Okay, people say they can hear me
Yeah,
fine.
yeah.
Hopefully, Jacob is,
We'll be back soon.
yeah.
I Oh, I think he dropped off. I think he'll join.
Uh, I think some folks need to mute.
Yes, if everyone can mute, that'll be great. All right. Should we continue with the slides and then we can come back to the rest of the questions?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, yes.
All right. Chiku, do you want to share your slides?
Yeah. So before we go to the next slide, I quickly want to talk about what drives engagement and mobilization, right? Even before we talk about ideas to mobilize our volunteers, before we talk about like strategies or uh, different ways we can do this, I think one thing we need to understand is first internally what makes me feel engaged, what makes me feel mobilized. And the answer is very simple. It's because uh, we'll talk about that in the next slide. But what I want you to do is go back in time when, say, if you have volunteered, excellent. Think about your own journey. Think about what engaged you or what mobilized you. Or think of that lecture that you walked out of, or that professor whose lectures you never attended, or another lecture, another professor whose lectures you always attended, right? We've always at some point of time been engaged by something that we've been doing. So when I ask myself that question, I feel engaged when you then know how to sort of flip it and make those your strategies for what you want to do. So personally for me, I feel engaged when I'm enjoying myself. I feel cared for and supported. I feel like I'm constantly learning and growing. Not just that, I'm also pushed or challenged beyond my potential. Uh, I feel engaged when I'm creating an impact and solving challenges. Some validation is definitely needed, right? Uh, I feel engaged when I feel like my time is being utilized. I feel engaged when I feel like I truly belong to that community. And lastly, when I feel heard and involved. So let's stay on this slide for a bit. Uh, these are the things that engage me, right? And I'm sure that a lot of you are also nodding when I pointed these things because they engage you as well, right? Another way to look at it also is if this is not happening, you have people leaving. So if this webinar is not letting you enjoy yourself or feeling that you're learning something or your time is being utilized, you're likely to click the leave button and move on from this webinar, right? It depends on how well all of us here can engage you to stay on, right? Similarly with volunteering, a lot of these factors play a big role. Some volunteers may have some of these as non-negotiable as well. The second they don't feel heard or involved, they leave. Or the second they feel that, the thing that I'm doing is too difficult, I'm not creating any impact, I'm not solving any challenges, they leave. Or if they feel like, this is a very stagnant role as a volunteer, I just show up, I do 4 things, and then I come back again 3 weeks later and do that. If they feel that they're not learning and growing, they leave, right? So you as a leader or as somebody working with volunteers need to try and emulate all of these through the things that you do on a day-to-day basis. Make sure that your volunteers are enjoying themselves, that they feel cared for and supported, that they're learning and growing, that they're pushed beyond their potential, that they're creating an impact and solving challenges. Give them that visibility, let them know what they have done, make sure that their time is being utilized. make sure that they feel included, right? That's exactly what somebody had asked sometime before. How do we make sure people feel included and feel that the space is safe when they feel heard and involved, right? So these are definitely things that you should be looking to do. Let's move on to the next slide, and I'll talk about where all can you do this. What are the different touch points or different platforms where you can engage volunteers, right? So I'm just going to read out what's here and then explain in detail uh, the different touch points where you can engage your volunteers or mobilize them are recruitment, onboarding, training, WhatsApp groups, social media, video conferencing or Zoom, and real life meetups, right? If you realize the last four, the four at the bottom, makes sense. But a lot of organizations, a lot of people don't realize that recruitment, onboarding, and training are great spaces for you to start engaging with your volunteers. The first level when a volunteer interacts with you is at probably at a recruitment level where you're bringing them on board and saying, hey, you are a part of my organization XYZ. If they don't feel engaged there, they're already likely to say, okay, you know what, let me move on, this doesn't make sense. But if you can engage them then and there, you make a great first impression, right? We often think, okay, let's get them to do work on ground and volunteers will be excited. But what we don't realize is right when we are calling them, right when we are recruiting them and onboarding them, if they are not engaged, they are likely to be less interested. So recruitment, onboarding, and training is a great place to set expectations, is a great place to engage, is a great place to make these volunteers aware of the role that they're going to be doing. Because a lot of volunteers feel disengaged when their expectations are not matching. So when you're recruiting them, when you're onboarding them, when you're training them, make sure you set the right expectations. At any of these points, allow your volunteers to get back to you and say, hey, this is working for me or this is not working for me. Don't spend further time investing in them when they already don't feel like the expectations are matching, right? So leave spaces where volunteers can get back to you and say, hey, this is not what I signed up for. And it's okay to have them move on so that you can get people who know what they're signing up for and it's matching with your expectations. That being said, the four more commonly used spaces for volunteer engagement are WhatsApp groups or chat groups, social media where they interact with your organization or your team's page, Zoom or video conferencing because right now that's how people meet. And lastly, I'd use the word real life meetups because uh, I don't remember the last time some of us met our teams or met our friends, and we've all been scattered across the country or the world, right? So that's going to take some time, but these are all possible places where you can engage with your volunteers, right? So far we've spoken about the mindsets, we've spoken about the perspectives of volunteer engagement, we've spoken about when do I feel engaged, and the previous slide we spoke about different spaces where we can engage volunteers. And only now have we reached what different ideas I have, and these are ideas that I've definitely tried out a lot, and they're all functional, they can work. Let's look at them. But before that, I just want to say I've narrowed them down to two things, right? I said that volunteers feel connected when you push them out of their comfort zone, or when they feel like they're reaching more than their potential, when they're doing uh, when they feel like when they are heard, when they feel like they belong, and so on. But I've simply brought it down or crunched that to capacity building and building connections. There are a lot more ideas for the rest of the points that engage volunteers, but for now we'll look at these two, and I feel like these two can solve a lot of your volunteer engagement and mobilization challenges. So let's look at some of the ideas, right? Firstly, with capacity building, when you're designing your volunteering role, can you design it in such a way that every role is always uh, designed so that volunteers can level up and eventually reach your role. So if you're starting at a CEO role, or if you're starting at a full-time employee, a director role, design your volunteer roles as a fraction of that, so that if your volunteers are constantly leveling up, they can join you on board as a full-time employee. If you do that, volunteers are going to level up. They are going to aspire to join your team full-time if they're as passionate about the cause as you are. That's why internal hires are always best, where people come in with context and they have worked with you as volunteers, right? And as an extension to that, your senior volunteers, or basically volunteers who've been there for, let's say you're getting volunteers every 3 months. Someone who's doing their second 3 months can already start taking up leadership roles or volunteer management roles. The moment a volunteer feels that they're being invested in, that they are leveling up, or that they're learning new things, you will be able to give them a lot of space to engage themselves. And you don't have to put a lot of effort to engage them. They will feel like they are on your side, right? We spoke about us and them. You want to bring everybody towards us. So can you make your volunteers manage each other as well, right? That would be great. Then, as an organization, or as a team leader, or as a team itself, can you constantly provide resources to your team to level up? If you are working for environment, then constantly sharing different articles, different talks, different new laws that have been proposed, legislature, anything that you can share with your team that will make them read or learn and level up, right? If you're managing people, let them also get an experience of that, so that they are leveling up. Then constantly making volunteers aware of the bigger picture. If you as an organization are not making your volunteer aware of the bigger picture, if they are just showing up every weekend or every month to do tasks, they are likely to get disengaged. If you can show them how that connects to the big picture, they're more likely to be engaged, right? Then having monthly L&D sessions. Again, we spoke about all the platforms in the previous slide, where you can do monthly L&D sessions face to face. You can do it uh, on Zoom calls. You can do it on WhatsApp. You can do it anywhere, right? Then I want to introduce another concept called a WhatsAppinar. Like today, how all of you are on a webinar, a WhatsAppinar is more like a webinar that's done on WhatsApp, where let's say you start your day at 10 a.m., where you share, say, a video or an article or a document, and then you let your team who's in that WhatsApp group or any social media group that you have, let them discuss it all through the day after they watch it. That way you don't have to necessarily schedule a call, right? The most common memes right now are that meeting could have been an email, right? So you can use WhatsAppinars as a space to share material and get your team to actually share their opinions and ask questions. And you have an admin who's answering those questions at the end of the session or at the end of the day. So WhatsAppinars are something that we've tried out and has worked wonders for us. Lastly, a crazy idea is TED Talk Mondays, where every Monday you share a new TED Talk with your team and that is relevant to your field, say on WhatsApp. You can do it as a WhatsAppinar, or you share it with them via email, and then the next day they discuss it, actively open it up, talk about what they took away, whether it's relevant, not relevant, anything like that. So this is a crazy idea that you can definitely try out when you're trying to build capacity in your team, right? So that is one half. The second half is build.
Once, sorry, Bharat, to interrupt you. Vidwansh had a specific thing to your previous slide. He said, Vidwansh says, providing resources to develop, like what resources? You talked about offering resources to develop. Can you just give an example, please?
Sure. Thank you for asking that. Resources could be anything from videos to documents to articles, anything they can read up and level up, or say even a course on Coursera. Like, you as an employer or you as a manager, constantly look out for different things you can share. Like if you find a course on Udemy or Coursera that you feel your volunteers would benefit from, share that link with them and say, hey, you know what, you can do this course, this will help you level up, right? Or even connecting them to the right people who can help them level themselves up, right? Anything could be a resource here.
Bharat, can I ask for another question
Yeah, yeah,
related to the same slide?
sure.
Pawan said, how can we prioritize culture and professionalism in a social organization where more than half the workforce are volunteers and professionalism goes away? Uh, Two, because it gives a corporate kind of feel. Volunteering is more about connecting and comes from within. So I
Right.
think if you can explain culture and professionalism and how we maybe relate them for better functioning. It's a great
Sure.
question from Pawan. Thank you, Pawan.
Yeah, thank you, Pawan. Yeah, I think this is a challenge that I have also faced. We've also talked about this a lot at my previous organization, which was Make a Difference. Like I said, a good balance between fun and seriousness. The fun element can still be there, but the seriousness could be brought about in professionalism. Now, professionalism starts from your level, where the way you interact with your volunteers, the way you communicate. If you say, hey, we have a call at 10, you should ideally be there at 9:45 to make sure that everything is set up, everything is ready, you're dressed smart, you're professional about your approach. And once you feel that at your level that is being accomplished, slowly let that start trickling down to your volunteers. It may take a year or two, especially because, or at least, if not a year or two, at least a couple of cycles where the first batch of volunteers who are being exposed to this may also be like, hey, what? Until last week we were having a lot of fun. Now suddenly you want us to dress professionally, you want us to show up on time. What is going on? But it will take a couple of cycles where those volunteers first adapt to this change, where they are okay with professionalism and you set whatever guidelines you want for professionalism. And as they are on board, the next batch of volunteers can be mentored by them. And by your third cycle, you'll realize that is the norm, right? I feel like a lot of these changes take at least a couple of cycles where your third set of volunteers will enjoy the benefits of what you're designing today. No problem. Awesome. To the last set of ideas, you can see I very clearly struck out networking. I'm talking about building connections more than building networks. Uh, you want your volunteers to build good, deep connections with the people that they're working with. Uh, think about all the best teams that you've been a part of. You have been connected to everybody around. It could be even a sports team, it could be a team at your workplace, it could be at your current job. Uh, if people are not connected, you're likely to like treat it as work. And volunteering is not exactly work. For a lot of people, it is them following their passion a lot, right? So how do you build these connections? You do one-on-one calls with each of your volunteers at least once a month, right? So if you're an organization that has 10,000 volunteers and you're wondering how do I get on calls with them, like at least have say 50 to 100 senior volunteers who can talk to them, right? Divide your work among your full-time staff and also your senior volunteers who are ensuring that other volunteers are doing okay, right? It's not just on you. Uh, as you speak to them once a month, make sure these calls are structured in such a way that you're supporting and caring for these volunteers, making sure that these calls are for checking if the volunteer is having a good time volunteering with you, and also knowing and understanding their work life or college life, especially if you have a lot of students. uh, don't make these calls about work saying, hey, what happened to the uh, can we go back, sorry, previous slide. Yeah, please stay on this slide for a while. Yeah, so when you call your volunteers one-on-one calls, it's not like, hey, what happened to the leads last week, or what is going on, what is the progress of this project, or anything like that. Like, truly inject care into it. So if you know that they've had exams, start by talking about how they did in their exams, how is their life, how is everything around them, because if they're not in a good space, they're not likely to give their 100% to volunteer. And it's obviously a good thing to care for people. I would strongly endorse it. So yeah, that's what you do on these one-on-one calls. Then, if possible, bring all your volunteers together for a monthly circle or a meet where physically you're sitting together, you're having sharing circles where people are sharing about the work that you're doing, about the challenges that you're facing, about different things, so that constantly people get to know everybody else in their team and also feel like they are not alone, right? If in the current COVID scenario, you're not able to bring them together physically for a monthly meet, do that on video calls. That is also okay. Now, video calls allow you to have breakout rooms where people can also split off separately and have these conversations as well, right? Then creating a culture of celebrating success together. Please, please, please do this. Make sure that all your volunteers are coming together and enjoying what they've accomplished. You could do that in any way possible, depending on what your work culture is, right? Always ensure that your volunteers know that we are in this together. If your volunteer feels alone, singled out, not like they're a part of this, they are likely to move on, right? So in your communication, in your narratives, constantly let them know that we are in this together. Then start creating a culture of after work hangs that allows you to create a culture of fun, right? It's none of these are compulsory. You can have people who want to hang out, create a space for them. Even if you're not the kind that is likely to do some of these things, create a space so that your team can do this and you can join them once in a while, right? Then gratitude circles. Like we spoke about, if volunteers don't feel like they are making an impact or making a difference, they are not likely to continue because there is no validation for the work that they're doing. So create gratitude circles where everybody is sharing what they're grateful for, thanking each other, especially highlighting the impact that other people have had in their lives, right? And lastly, a crazy idea, like I said, TED Talk Mondays, you do Fun Fridays where you can do any of these, where Fridays are meant for people to hang together after work or do these gratitude circles or create a culture like celebrating together or anything. Like you have days like Mondays for learning and Fridays for fun. And irrespective of what week, what year, what month it is, you know that these days are assigned for that and people learn or have fun on those days. And you can give the ownership of those days also to your volunteers. Let them come up with something, right? You're always co-creating rather than designing and saying, hey guys, it's Friday, we should have fun now, right? Not how it works, right? So in conclusion, all I'd like to say is find people that believe in your cause and invest in them. Invest your time, energy, resources, and you will be able to build a great team of volunteers that are engaged and mobilized, right? I know we've tried to cover this in about half an hour for what should be probably a 3-day workshop. So if you have further questions, if you have any doubts, or even if you would like to collaborate, uh, if you can actually go back to the slides, I just want to leave my details out there. If you could share your screen. Yeah. Next slide, please. Yeah, if you're looking for any ideas, if you're looking to collaborate, I'm currently a freelance consultant. So if you need ideas, feel free to reach out to me. You can find me on the email ID that I created in 10th standard and can't do anything about the name. It's bharatbigb@gmail.com. On Instagram and Twitter, the ID that I created when I thought I was very cool, at DONBRATMAN, and LinkedIn, you can find my name, Bharat Bhaskaran. You can also find the nice folks at jhatka.org on their website. Uh, if you have any questions, you can reach out to info@jhatka.org with volunteer engagement in the subject line. I'll make sure I address all your questions. And you can find them on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook at jhatka.org. Right. So I think with that, we come to the end of what I wanted to share. Let's take your questions.
Uh, Hi. Okay. Questions. We have lots of questions. We surely won't be able to answer all of them. So I'm just going to not repeat the names. I've already asked questions. We have something from Dwani Parekh. Dwani asks, how do you start building a base without being too intensive on the ground? Some organizations might need volunteers for specific purposes, part-time volunteers, and are not aiming at becoming a full-blown volunteer organization. How would you tweak some of the on-ground intensive strategies? Examples, inductions, monthly meets, after work hangouts. What could be the alternatives?
Yeah.
Can the core be built through a few pointed, efficient touch points?
Right. Awesome. I think that's definitely something you can do. And all my learnings are from the last 3 or 4 months where we've been doing these on Zoom or on video calls, where your uh, induction or your onboarding can actually just be an email with a lot of links and documents that people can go through, and you have a check for understanding at the end to make sure that they've gone through everything and they've understood what you're talking about, and you keep the conversation alive through Zoom calls or video calls where you assign one day for this organization. So for volunteers, it's if it's like say Wednesday, every Wednesday they make sure that they have 4 hours set aside to do this. And if you can make that a part of their routine, if you can make that as a part of their culture, you can do whatever it is that you have in mind by choosing whatever touch points you want. Right? Like I said, uh, you can choose trainings, I think, are important. And as for mobilization, you can do a little bit of learning where they're leveling themselves up, and also some amount of bonding or connectedness that they build through this.
Thank you, Bharat. Thank you, Dwani. Ankita Kumari has asked, during this pandemic situation, we are meeting on Zoom. What kind of fun activities can we conduct along with learnings?
Right. Now there are a lot of games. I've played online Pictionary, which is a lot of fun. You can play games like Psych. You can play different online games that everybody comes in together, and you keep your video chat on and you play the game together as a multiplayer game on your phone or something like that, where people are still making jokes, laughing, talking to each other. It feels like you're all in the same room, right? I think the idea is to simulate or emulate what it feels like when you're really around each other. I've also attended online quizzes, like I was an active part of attending, say, pub quizzes in Bangalore. Now we've been able to do that on Zoom, where people are, sitting with a beer in their hand and uh, sitting at their house and still participating in the pub quiz. It's all about how you can create that environment through a video call as well.
Thank you, Bharat. Ankita, hope that answered your questions. We got some great suggestions. Dave has asked a question: how important is it to divide departments within an organization? I've come across this confusion of letting people choose what they like or putting them in different departments to get work done, which may not be something they necessarily like. So, how important is it to divide departments within an organization?
Excellent. I think it's a very good question. So I think you should divide it based on the nature of work, and then let at least the first X number of people choose based on what their interests are. But if, as an organization, your narrative could be around doing what it takes to solve the problem, you also ask people to be flexible. And that's in the expectations that you set, right? Otherwise, you don't want people saying, hey, I didn't sign up for this. But you do let the first people who join choose whichever department they are comfortable with, but also letting them be flexible so that you can fill out in other departments where they feel that they can help out in. Or you can have people double up as well. That's basically, a lot of volunteers are waiting to do more. So don't ever hold back on a volunteer saying, oh, I think I'm making them commit to too much time commitment. This is something I've heard a lot, right? Let the volunteer be the judge of that. You make a bunch of things mandatory that they need to do as a volunteer. Let them do more, and you will realize that they're coming for your job directly. That's how much passion people have, and that's how much they want to do. They're ready to do your role as well.
Thanks, Bharat. We have time for. Do we have time for another question, Divya? Do we have time?
We have about 5 minutes.
Okay.
Maybe another question. Yeah.
Okay. Uh, Supriya has a really good question, but Supriya, I think that's a question a lot of us
Yeah,
want. So let's save that for the blog. We'll answer that question on mail. It's a really good question you have there. I just want to move on to one Excel's question, which is how to convince or make your teammate agree if they don't want to adopt your way of work, but you still want them on the team. So I believe the question is they don't want to adopt your processes and your systems, but you still want them on the team. How do we fix that on a volunteer with a volunteer? Bharat, are we there? I think we've frozen. We've lost Bharat.
Oh, we've lost him. Oh, he's back.
really sorry about that.
Bharat,
Right.
yeah,
Can you all
go
hear
ahead.
me?
Yeah.
Sorry, could you repeat the question? I disconnected just before that.
Sometimes a volunteer does not want to adopt the processes of the organization. They don't want to adopt your way of work, but they still want to be on the team. How do we convince them? Uh, how do we convince this teammate to cooperate?
Right. Like I said, expectation setting is everything. You do that right at the start and try and follow up constantly by talking about the expectations that you do have with these volunteers, right? And if somewhere it's not met, you can have an open conversation with them saying, hey, this is the direction the organization is taking, and this is what you feel. Is there a way we can reach middle ground, or is there something else we can do where you also feel like you're contributing fully, right? It's always you coming from a space of care, you coming from a space of inquisitiveness, or whatever you want to call it, where you are trying to understand why they feel that way. And if you can meet them midway, or if you can make accommodations to fit in what they want to do, excellent. If you can't, I think as an organization you also need to be open to saying, hey, it doesn't look like there is a match of ideologies or direction that we want to take. Do you feel like volunteering elsewhere would be better for you? And if you as an organization can have that conversation, nothing like it, right? Giving them also the option that they don't have to be stuck here. Sometimes they feel guilty when they have to back out. So making that an open conversation helps.
Thank you, Bharat. I'm really sorry to the audience. We've noted all your questions, and we know we have not answered at least a dozen of them. Really sorry about that. Uh, okay, so we have, sorry, Bharat, but you will be answered on email, and definitely all the questions will be answered on our blog. Please do check out our blog. It's shatka.org/news. Uh, but before we shut this session down, we really need your help to make this session better. Remember, this is a two-part session. We have a session next week, same time on Wednesday, again hosted by Divya and myself with Bharat. And but before we do that, please click on this form. It's an anonymous feedback form. It's just a really simple rating before and after. Rate the session, rate your knowledge before the session of 1 to 10, and rate the session after, rate your knowledge after the session 1 to 10. That's it. Just it's a 1 to 10 scale. Thank you, Swati. Requesting you to please put your feedback in that link that we just shared, because that's the only way we can improve. Thank you, Sakshi. Thank you, Danya. Please use that form to give us your feedback. We need your inputs. Thank you, Dave. Really appreciate that. Please do use that form and send us. Thank you, Arun Kumar. Please do click that link.
Thank you so
Thanks,
much,
Nitin.
everyone.
Thanks, Tejaswini. Thanks, Ashna. Thank you, Sakshi. Please do fill up that form so that we have an insight into how you learned and what we can do better. We want the next session to be better. This was purely about, Bharat, why don't you just say, go ahead, and what is
Yeah.
this session about? How is the next one different?
Yeah. So this session spoke a lot about volunteer management from your mindset, some ideas about how you can engage volunteers better. Uh, The second part is going to be a lot about the process, is going to be a lot about how do you manage your volunteers? How do you set your parameters for volunteer participation and how do you track it? And how do you look at that from a year on year progress where how do you even find out if your volunteers are uh, creating the impact you want them to create and who are the volunteers who are creating that impact for you. So if you can track that and manage volunteers, that would be a great help for you. So I'm hoping that in the next session we cover all of that, which will be a lot from a tools and process point of view. So I'm looking forward. I think we had close to 90 people today. I'm looking forward to seeing all of you for the part 2 as well. And
Thank you. I'm going to share
thank you
that
for
link
the
one more
lovely
time. Yeah.
comments.
Yeah. Thank you
I'm
for the
just
wonderful comments.
quickly skimming through them as well.
Thank you, Neeta. I really appreciate that. We're going to save that. Divya, just handing this over to you, please.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thanks, Bharat, for taking us through all these best practices. At least I've already noted down a bunch of things that we want to try at Jhatka, um, especially the WhatsApp webinar. I'm really curious about it. I really want to try it out and see how it works. We've also had some great questions that were answered. I'd just quickly like to remind our participants that yes, we do have, this is a this is part one of a two-part series. We have the next one next Wednesday, June 10th, 5 p.m. We'll send you all the registration link soon, and we look forward to seeing you there. One quick thing was that at Chatka, something that we're doing right now around COVID is mass distribution for people who are working in the front line. So, we would love to hear from you if you know people who are working on the front lines or would you like to volunteer for some of our mass distribution activities. Please do write to us on info@chatka.org and we will get back in touch with you. So yeah, I just wanted to say that in closing. And again, if you have any burning questions that were not answered during the webinar, please feel free to write to us on info@chatka.org with the webinar name in the subject line. So yeah, thank you so much again for participating and we really hope you found this engaging and useful. Thanks again, Bharat, and we will see all of you
Thank you.
same time next week.
Thank you for watching our webinar. Please like, subscribe, or share our YouTube channel.